There was a moment when I was only in rehab for like, I don't know, 3 weeks or a month, and I got the call. We want to renegotiate the giant contract for season 8 and 9. And I was on the phone. I said, I don't think so.
There are television finales that quietly close the curtain, and then there are finales that slam it shut so hard the whole building shakes. 2.5 Men did the latter. After 12 seasons, hundreds of episodes, and more behind-the-scenes drama than most shows generate in a lifetime, the long-running CBS sitcom ended with a single scene so bizarre, so audacious, and so deeply layered with real-world meaning that audiences were still talking about it days later. A piano fell from the sky. And somehow, that was the perfect ending to one of the most chaotic rides in television history. But to understand why that scene hit the way it did, you have to understand everything that came before it. Because 2.5 Men was never just a show about a bachelor, his brother, and a kid. It was a show that survived a real-life meltdown of historic proportions, reinvented itself against all odds, and somehow kept millions of viewers tuning in week after week. The finale wasn't just an ending. It was a statement. And if you know the full story, every second of it makes perfect sense. 2.5 Men premiered on CBS on September 22, 2003, created by Chuck Lorre and Lee Aronsohn. The premise was deceptively simple. A wealthy, womanizing jingle writer named Charlie Harper shares his Malibu beach house with his uptight, recently divorced brother Alan and Alan's young son Jake. The dynamic was classic odd couple territory, but the execution was sharp, the jokes were fast, and the cast had genuine chemistry from the very first episode. Charlie Sheen was the linchpin. His portrayal of Charlie Harper was effortless in a way that felt almost eerie, largely because the distance between the character and the actor himself was razor thin. Charlie Harper drank too much, chased women without apology, dodged responsibility like it was his full-time job, and somehow remained lovable through all of it. Sheen brought that character to life with a natural ease that no amount of acting training can manufacture. He wasn't performing a carefree bachelor. He was essentially playing a polished version of the life he was already living. John Cryer as Alan Harper was the perfect counterweight. Neurotic, perpetually broke despite his chiropractic career, and hopelessly dependent on his brother's generosity, Alan was the butt of countless jokes and somehow the emotional center of the entire show. Cryer's comedic timing was exceptional, and he managed to make Alan sympathetic even at his most pathetic. The relationship between Charlie and Alan wasn't just funny. It was oddly heartfelt, built on the kind of brotherly exasperation that only exists between people who genuinely love each other underneath all the irritation. Young Angus T. Jones as Jake completed the trio. Jake was the half-man referenced in the title, a kid growing up between two very different adult role models, soaking up the wrong lessons from both of them with cheerful obliviousness. Jones was a natural in the role, and as the seasons passed and Jake grew older, the character evolved in interesting ways that kept the family dynamic fresh. By the mid-2000s, 2.5 Men had become a television phenomenon. During the 2007 to 2008 season, it ranked as the most watched comedy on American television. Millions of viewers tuned in every Monday night. The show was a ratings machine, a cultural touchstone, and a reminder that the traditional multi-camera sitcom with a live studio audience wasn't dead yet, no matter what the critics said. Behind the cameras, something very different was unfolding. Charlie Sheen's personal life had always been turbulent, but as the show's success grew, so did the instability surrounding him. There were arrests, incidents, and rehabilitation stays that became a recurring pattern throughout the show's run. For years, the production managed to work around these disruptions, largely because Sheen was still showing up, still delivering performances, and still drawing audiences. The network and studio made calculated decisions to look the other way because the show was simply too valuable to risk. By 2010, Sheen had become the highest-paid actor on American television, earning close to $2 million per episode when profit participation was factored in. That number alone tells you how indispensable the network considered him. When you are paying someone that much money, you are making a very clear statement about how much your operation depends on that single human being. The problem with building that kind of dependency is that it works perfectly, right up until it doesn't. The collapse came rapidly in early 2011. What had been a series of managed crises escalated into something no publicity team could spin. Sheen made inflammatory statements in public. He gave interviews that left viewers genuinely uncertain whether they were watching a performance or a breakdown. He attacked Chuck Lorre by name, using language that was both personal and widely reported. He made claims about himself that were so grandiose they became instant cultural currency, phrases, and expressions that spread across the internet almost immediately. People were fascinated and disturbed in equal measure. CBS and Warner Brothers, the studio producing the show, initially paused production with the stated intention of giving Sheen time to stabilize. That attempt at a quiet resolution quickly became irrelevant as Sheen continued making public appearances and statements that kept the story alive in the press every single day. On March 7, 2011, Warner Brothers terminated Charlie Sheen's contract. The termination letter reportedly ran to 11 pages and detailed a range of conduct violations. Approximately 200 crew members and production staff were directly affected by the shutdown. 8 episodes that had already been scheduled were cancelled. The financial damage was significant, but the studios made clear that some situations cannot be managed with money alone. Sheen responded by filing a lawsuit seeking $100 million in damages. The legal dispute eventually went to arbitration and was settled confidentially, with various reports suggesting the final figure was substantial. But the professional relationship was finished. Whatever Two and a Half Men became next, it would become without Charlie Sheen. Replacing the central figure of a massively successful sitcom is one of the most dangerous creative gambles in television. The history of the medium is full of examples where such replacements accelerated a show's decline rather than extending its life. The producers of Two and a Half Men knew this. The question wasn't simply who could fill the role. The question was whether the show could survive the attempt. Several names were reportedly considered. Hugh Grant was reportedly in serious negotiations for a period, with discussions progressing to the point where many in the industry assumed he would be announced. Those talks collapsed due to creative differences, leaving the production in an urgent position with an advertiser presentation approaching. Ashton Kutcher emerged as the solution. The announcement came in May 2011. Kutcher was widely known and genuinely likable, with a public image that was warm and self-deprecating. He was also younger than the show's traditional audience, which raised questions about whether he could connect with viewers who had spent 8 years watching someone else. His character, Walden Schmidt, was deliberately constructed to be the opposite of Charlie Harper in most meaningful ways. Where Charlie was street-smart and emotionally closed off, Walden was a technology billionaire who was emotionally transparent, socially uncertain, and dealing openly with the pain of a failed marriage. He was sensitive in ways Charlie never was. He was awkward in situations Charlie would have navigated effortlessly. The contrast was intentional, and it gave the writers a fresh engine to work with. When Kutcher's debut episode aired on September 19, 2011, the viewership numbers were extraordinary. More than 28 million people watched, roughly double the show's previous averages. Curiosity is a powerful force. People wanted to see how the show handled Charlie Harper's absence, and the answer the writers provided was blunt and darkly comic. Charlie Harper had died in Paris, struck by a train. The episode opened with his funeral, and from that point forward, the story belonged to someone new. The transition wasn't seamless, and it wasn't supposed to be. Some longtime viewers never fully accepted the change. But enough of the audience stayed to keep the show running for 4 more seasons, a remarkable achievement given the circumstances. Kutcher settled into the role, the writers found new rhythms, and Alan Harper, John Cryer's perpetually struggling character, actually became more interesting in the dynamic. Alan, as the experienced, world-weary advisor to the naive billionaire Walden, was a genuinely funny inversion of his previous role as the lesser Harper brother. While the Sheen drama dominated public attention, a quieter but equally fascinating storyline was developing around Angus T. Jones, the actor who had played Jake Harper since he was 10 years old. Jones had grown up on that set. He had spent his formative years surrounded by adult humor, mature storylines, and content that became increasingly difficult for him to reconcile with who he was becoming as a person. By the time he entered his late teens and early 20s, he had found a deep personal faith through the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that faith brought the show's content into sharp focus for him in uncomfortable ways. In 2012, Jones appeared in a video where he urged people to stop watching Two and a Half Men, describing it in terms that were both sincere and awkward given that he was still being paid $300,000 per episode to appear on it. The reaction was immediate. Some people admired his willingness to speak honestly about a conflict most actors in his position would never acknowledge publicly. Others viewed the statement as deeply unfair to the cast and crew who had worked alongside him for years. Jones apologized for the way his comments landed but did not walk back the underlying concern. He had been asking writers for some time to exclude him from scenes he found personally objectionable. The relationships on set had grown strained. He was moving away from the show emotionally and spiritually even while still technically working on it. His departure from the main cast was formalized by the 11th season. He enrolled at the University of Colorado Boulder to study environmental and Jewish studies, charting a path that had nothing to do with Hollywood. He later said publicly that he felt genuinely at peace with the choices he had made, even understanding that they appeared unusual from the outside. What is remarkable about Jones in retrospect is how clearly he illustrated something the show itself was always quietly about. What happens when the life you are living doesn't match the person you believe yourself to be? Charlie Harper was the ultimate expression of someone who refused to examine that question. Jake Harper, in real life, did the opposite. CBS announced that 2.5 Men would end after its 12th season. The finale was titled Of Course Is Dead, and even the title was a layered joke, a response to the question fans had been asking since Charlie Harper was supposedly killed off 4 seasons earlier. The promotional campaign for the finale was carefully orchestrated to maximize uncertainty. There were hints that Charlie Harper might return. Charlie Sheen himself added to the confusion by making cryptic public statements the day before the episode aired, suggesting he wouldn't appear while winking in a way that kept everyone guessing. The script had been kept under strict secrecy during filming, with cast members only receiving the portions directly relevant to their own scenes. When the episode finally aired on February 19, 2015, it drew an audience of over 13 million viewers. The story brought several threads to a close. Alan, after years of mooching and stumbling through life, found himself in an oddly satisfying place. Jake returned briefly, now an adult who had quietly turned an inheritance from his uncle into genuine wealth. Walden's arc reached a meaningful conclusion. The beach house, the setting for 12 years of comedy and chaos, was given its proper farewell.